Hello and welcome again. It's so nice to see you. I'm really excited that you've decided to practice with me today. There's something I wanted to mention, however, before we start this drill. And it is that if you find that I'm speaking too fast or too slow, you can change the speed reproduction of the video. I think you know that, don't you? You just go to the settings button of the YouTube video you're watching, down to the bottom right hand corner, and you click there on the wheel shaped icon, and you will see a small menu cropping up where it will also talk about the speed reproduction, and you can click on the speed reproduction, and from there you can select which is the speed that is most appropriate to achieve your training goals. And having said this, I'm going to start now. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Thank you very much for coming to the first in a series of 7 lectures about cell biology. I have the honor of being your first speaker, which doesn't necessarily mean it is an easy task. Why am I saying this? Well, because as I'm not a scientist, but a terminology nerd instead, what I'm going to do is talk about many different concepts that are very basic, just to make sure that you can practice them in doing simultaneous interpreting while I give my speech. So please bear with me if many of you already have heard about these concepts before, and just focus on the linguistic side of things. And now I'm going to go back to cell biology. I'm going to start by defining what a cell and an organism are. A cell is the basic unit of life. Cells are the building blocks that make us all up. And if we want to live a long life, we need our cells to survive. And for that, they must be resistant to changes taking place in the external environment. And one of the reasons why cells are surrounded by a selectively permeable plasma cell membrane to protect them from any changes taking place in the external environment is this. It also means that the essential biochemical reactions that are taking place within the cell remain stable, increasing their survival and therefore allowing us to remain alive. An organism is scientifically defined as a unicellular or multicellular system capable of self-replication and self-repair. It is a lovely description, but when we talk about them, I think it's easier to think of them as any animal, plant, fungus, protist, bacterium, or archaean on Earth. It is also important to note that both unicellular and multicellular organisms are able to perform all functions of life. This proves that the number of cells an organism possesses plays no role whatsoever in its ability to survive. Having said this, let's move on and talk now about prokaryotes. What are prokaryotes? They are the simplest single-celled or unicellular organisms lacking a distinct nucleus and other organelles because they don't possess internal membranes. And bacteria and archaea are among the best known prokaryotic organisms that exist. The main features of a prokaryotic cell are the following. First of all, we have to say that they have a cell membrane which is made up of phospholipids. At the same time, all the components of the cell are housed in a single cytoplasmic compartment. They reproduce by binary fission, meaning that they divide into 2 halves, by means of a kind of asexual reproduction process. In some cases, there are prokaryotes that have flagella and may even also contain additional circular DNA molecules called plasmids. Protein synthesis in prokaryotes is carried out in the cytoplasm, where you will also find ribosomes and a double-stranded DNA chromosome, which is usually also circular. You might be finding it strange that I'm focusing so much on prokaryotes, but the truth is that I'm doing so because I thought that as they represent the most primitive life form we know, and seemingly eukaryotic, unicellular and multicellular organisms have evolved from them, they should be given their place. As you know, we're talking about eukaryotic organisms resulting from them due to natural selection and mutation. The survival of these cells depends on diffusion, which basically only means that the particles in the cell are free to move, because that way the molecules required for energy and biosynthesis diffuse into the cell, crossing the plasma membrane, while waste products diffuse out of the cell across the plasma membrane. And the rate of diffusion is going to depend on the membrane surface area. The rate of diffusion can be calculated using different laws, like Graham's or Fick's law of diffusion. But for our purposes, we're just going to remember the two following rules. And you're going to have to focus a lot because they're very dense. Firstly, the cell volume expands to the cube of the linear increase. Secondly, the surface area only expands to the square of the linear increase. Prokaryotic cells are necessarily small to ensure the diffusion process is seamless, because otherwise these cells would not survive. I hope that you have survived our first drill and have found it interesting. Thank you very much for your attention. Well, that is the end of the exercise. And as you can see, what I've tried to do is thread all the different terms that I uploaded yesterday and give them some meaning so that you can practice them until you are familiar with them and they don't create any problems. If you speed up the video a little bit, then you will be able to play around with rephrasing and other sub-skills that are required for simultaneous interpreting. Like I said at the beginning, thank you ever so much for joining me and see you tomorrow. Bye bye.